Welcome to Believe in Chiefs, part of the Believe Network. Joined by former Chiefs offensive lineman Joe Valerio, I'm Jeff Fedotin. Be sure to subscribe, comment, rate, and follow this podcast and tell all of your Chiefs fans to do the same. You can also watch us on Believe TV around the country, in airports, and on YouTube. On this week's show, well, Joe, it's been such a crazy time for the Chiefs. We had so much to break down with the Super Bowl, to preview it, to analyze it. We kind of didn't talk about some important news that involved the son of your former head coach, Marty Schottenheimer. So we're going to talk about the hiring of Brian Schottenheimer by the Cowboys and also the Chiefs' plethora of free agents. Joe, before we get to this, though, for any of those who are, watching online or seeing our social media clips, I kind of match our Believe in Chiefs background, Joe, with my face a little bit here.
Yeah, there you go, buddy. You're definitely a little more sunburned than I usually see you in that Chicago Midwestern weather. You'll have to tell us a little bit about why you are a little bit more Chiefs colored today than normal.
Well, the real reason I'm more Chiefs colored is because I'm so normally pale. Whenever I spend 15 seconds in the sun, I get sunburned. But we were at a destination wedding in Cabo San Lucas for a friend of ours, and it was a good time. But Joe, it's been a whirlwind Super Bowl week, and then go all the way to Cabo San Lucas. Great trip. Got to see some whales, but these are definitely first world problems to be exhausted from trips like that, but running on fumes a little bit here, Joe.
Yeah, well, good distraction too, Jeff, from the Chiefs' loss and what happened in the Super Bowl, and to give your brain some time to think about what they're going to do to rebuild and reload. I mean, I don't think this is, I don't know. It's bordering on rebuilding and reloading, and we can talk about that when we start looking at some of the free agents, and we'll know more as Brett Veach and Andy and the Hunt family work their magic as far as who they can keep and who they can't based on the limited salary cap room that they have. It's going to be an interesting offseason for them. It's going to determine whether or not we're using a reloading or whether we're using a rebuilding term for this team to try to make it back to their 6th Super Bowl in 7 years, because it's definitely going to be, I think, based on what I saw in that Super Bowl, it's going to be a little bit more of an uphill climb.
Joe, and we're going to get to that a little bit later in the pod. We're going to talk about the 20 unrestricted free agents that the Chiefs have. Wow, that's a large number. But first, Joe, let's talk about Brian Schottenheimer. Kind of a surprise choice to become the head coach of the Cowboys. But what memories do you have of him from your playing days? I'm sure he was around the team.
Yeah, Brian was a senior in high school when I got drafted, and we were able to watch him win a state championship at Blue Valley High School when I was a rookie. And we went to a couple of games. You're a rookie, got nothing else to do, and you're just sitting around, and got to see Brian play a few games out at Blue Valley, and it was really, he was around when he could be, obviously, as a high school senior at training camp, made a visit here and there. He was always around the stadium, hanging out with the players, acting as like a coach's ball boy. He never had the official job of ball boy, but was always there to help out the equipment guys and, help the coaches set things up and things. It was always great to have him around. We knew that he was somebody who was destined, with his dad, his uncle, Kurt, who was our special teams coach. He was destined to be a football guy. And I think, the thing that, besides getting to see him play and talk about, we could talk certainly about his playing career at, Blue Valley, winning a state championship and all state accolades and all that stuff. He was obviously had great tutelage as a young guy growing up, right, with his dad and getting to be around players, right? Whether it was, I think Brian was actually born when his dad was playing in Denver. I think that's where Brian was. He was born in Denver. Mm-hmm. And then, and obviously with his dad as a player and as a coach and being around all those great players in Cleveland and wherever his dad coached, just a neat experience. You always know that those types of kids have a little bit of a leg up just from us by osmosis, right? And just being around it. But he always seemed to have an eye for it. Like he seemed to just have a little bit of a different slant on where he was going to go. And I think it comes true in what he did and how his college career panned out. Brian went to KU, his first year there. I think he knew that he was not going to really be a starter there when he went to KU. And, he went there to back up Chip Hillary, who was quite a good starter for KU. And I think what he made the decision with his dad to do was basically have a tough discussion to say, Dad, am I ever really going to be a top Division I player, and am I going to make it in the NFL as a player, right? So Brian took the smart route and said, came to the realization a career in the NFL was probably not going to be for him. And if you're going to ask anybody, it's going to be Marty Schottenheimer, because Marty's number one, he's going to give you an honest opinion, whether you're his son or not. And he's going to give you a caring opinion, a kind opinion. And I think the plan that they worked out to get Brian to this spot where he's now, coach of one of the NFL's most storied franchises is his decision to go to Florida, sit out a year because of the NCAA rules. My gosh, how different it was back then.
Yeah.
So he transfers to Florida, sits out, knowing that he is going to be tutored by literally one of the best offensive minds in all of football, not just college, and that's Steve Spurrier, right? So what I had heard, in the stories post, years, and just talking with Coach Schottenheimer on his updates to us, what Brian was up to during his time, because he basically mirrored my time, right, in the Chiefs, because I was there till 96. And, Brian was a senior in 1991, my rookie year in high school. He goes to KU. I watch him play there. He makes the transfer. He plays with Steve Spurrier from 94 to 96. That was all my time, right? That was exactly mirrored my time. And, Coach would give us updates on what Brian was up to. And it really came down to, when he backed up Danny Werfel there, goes to the 1996 national championship team, had 38 passes, couple hundred yards, couple touchdowns, ran for one. I mean, he had a nice little career at a national championship type school. But I think what he got out of it was the fact that what Coach Schottenheimer used to tell us was, now I have to say Coach Marty Schottenheimer, not Coach Brian Schottenheimer.
You got to specify.
What Coach Marty used to tell us was, he was like Steve, and he was, of course he's bragging about his son, but he was also telling the truth that, Brian became like a second coach on the field and on the sidelines for Steve Spurrier. And that's how in tune he was with the game. So that alone tells you, okay, now it's no surprise why he's here. He's not just a legacy that, said, hey, my dad coached the NFL. I deserve to coach in the NFL. I mean, this guy, Brian has paid his dues. I mean, he served as an assistant 1997 to 2005 with the Rams, the Chiefs. He went back to Syracuse. He was at USC, quarterbacks coach for the Redskins, then Redskins, now Commanders, the Chargers. I mean, he goes on to become offensive coordinator for the Jets. I mean, and when you go back and you look at his coaching resume and the stats that his players put up, I mean, he had a lot of really good, really, really good players. And he stays with the Jets as offensive coordinator, and he he did not interview for the Buffalo Bills job, but then he went on to the Jets went on that year to go to the AFC Championship game for the second straight year. So he really had a great run there in the first part of the 2000s or decade, right? The 2010, 9, 10 area. And then obviously he goes to the Rams, coordinator there. He goes back to Georgia, does major college again, back to the Colts.
Every place. Wow.
Seattle, right? Offensive coordinator, Jaguars, passing game coordinator, and then on to the Cowboys. Now, his step back to the Cowboys was a little bit of a step back. I mean, Jerry Jones probably had some good things in mind for him because he actually started as an offensive assistant with the Cowboys in 2022, where he was working with the defensive coordinator, providing analysis on the opposing teams.
Interesting.
So, very interesting route to take back with the Cowboys, and then ultimately gets promoted to offensive coordinator when Kellen Moore left, and now head coach. I mean, unbelievable, right? What a journey he's been on, and he's paid his dues. I mean, he is not. There's nothing that he has done that like reeks of nepotism or legacy type things being handed to you. He's put in the work, and I think he deserves this job. He deserves where he is, and I think I think time will tell and how it goes with we know how the Cowboys have gone since the Troy Aikman years. It's been lean. They've had great seasons, just haven't really been able to turn the notch up in the playoffs. So that will be probably his watermark, right? Is what he can do with a pretty awesome roster on offense. What can he do as the head coach now and getting them over the hump and win a playoff game or two?
We're definitely going to have more on Brian Schottenheimer, Joe, and your kind of connection to him. But first, BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball to the NHL and UFC, BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more. For every game, every play, and every win, BetOnline, the game starts here. Joe, I know you said that you guys could all tell that Brian Schottenheimer was going to be a coach. If I had told you that he would become the Dallas Cowboys head coach, would you be like, oh yeah, I could see that given all that he showed and his connection to Marty? Or would you be like, oh wow, what's your reaction to that?
I mean, he was, if I were learning this off the street, I'd think, yeah, it's pretty unique opportunity, but he was the offensive coordinator. And I think he came back to that franchise maybe with the hopes that things would work out for him. And they've put up some pretty good offensive stats. I mean, from what I've heard, there were a lot of players that were really pushing for him to become the head coach. Right. As they were going through the tumult of Mike McCarthy, which is another connection, right? Mike was right.
That's a great.
He was offensive assistant with Kansas City, and I'm sure he knew Brian pretty darn well with his relationship with Mike's relationship with his dad. Having been a mentor. Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy how that all comes away. As Mike McCarthy probably brings him there, and then he takes his job. So you got to be careful what you wish for in the NFL. But I'm not surprised. He was there as the offensive coordinator, but Dallas is a tough place to coach, and what I'm curious about is to see whether. Marty or Brian Marty. Here you go, pun and Freudian slip. If
easy to do, Joe. It probably won't be the last time.
It probably won't be. If Brian can overcome, sort of the Jerry Jones effect, right? About Jerry wanting to take control. Now you have to remember, he probably learned a lot from his dad. Marty was never really strong a proponent for the whole GM coach thing. I mean. Yeah. Marty liked to coach, and that's what he liked to do. And he, at least in my era with the Chiefs, I don't know, to be honest, I don't have a lot of inside baseball on what happened to Marty when he went to Washington or to San Diego. But, I would assume that he kind of kept that same type of coach role because in Kansas City, he was absolutely the coach. And there was a very distinct line between him and Carl Peterson. So, Brian probably learned a lot from that. So maybe he'll have some of that DNA where he'll understand how to maneuver through just working with a hands-on owner who kind of acts like a GM, and Brian will just coach, and he's just going to coach football, and he's not going to worry about making GM type moves. So very interesting dynamics in Dallas. And I guess, we'll see if his dad's DNA comes through in what he's able to do there in Dallas. And, if any Eagles fans that listen to this podcast because of my Philadelphia connection, they're going to want me to say that it's going to be horrible, right? Because the Eagles don't want to have a rival like they've had with Dallas, a rivalry with Dallas in the past. I mean, Dallas has given them fits over the years, even when Dallas wasn't good. It's a vaunted rivalry, so it will be anxious. I'll be anxious to see how that affects the race in the NFC East.
Joe, I don't know if you saw, there was a cool moment from the press conference, his initial opening press conference, that he said that he's like, yeah, I'm here to win. Caller. There was from the press conference, there was a really cool moment where he said, he was telling his family, yeah, I'm going to win or reach the Super Bowl that Dad never got to. And so I don't know if you saw that, a cool moment there.
That's pretty special that he's keeping his dad in his thoughts and kind of channeling his pops. I mean, that's I know they were very close, and I know they had a fantastic relationship. And the fact that his dad drug him around to all these different places as a kid, and it's not easy being a coach's son or a daughter, and it's not easy being the spouse or significant other of an NFL coach. And you're kind of in for a penny, in for a pound when you get into that lifestyle. So I think he understands the lifestyle. He understood it. He's in it, and ex of my Chiefs or Eagles friends, I do wish him extremely well, just because of the person he is and sort of the lineage and the connection that we have. Not well against the Eagles, but well in all the other games.
It's you mentioned Mike McCarthy and the connection, another Chiefs connection. It reminds me of probably another guys that you wished to do well, but not against the Chiefs. Was Nathaniel Hackett. It sounds like he was around when Paul Hackett was your offensive coordinator. So, Joe, talk about the two situations, Brian Schottenheimer and Nathaniel Hackett. Did you see one of them more than the other? Were you closer to one of them, or is it a good comp there?
Well, Nate was a little younger, so it was we probably saw Nate a little bit more. Now, I didn't know Nate until Coach Hackett came in 1993, so only got a few seasons with Nate as kind of hanging around the squad. But at that point, Brian was in college. So, he was only there like off season, right. Mini camps, a little bit of training camp before, Florida got their ball rolling, or when Brian was at KU that first year. So, yeah, so definitely saw Nate a lot more because he was a regular at camp. I mean, he was a lot younger. He was in either middle school or just heading into high school when he was, because he was one of those true like ball boy dad coach kids that was always around and, just kind of hanging around, helping out where he could and just learning the game, and pretty neat. I mean, it's not so much, I would call it, I mean, I guess you would call them being in Coach Schottenheimer, now Marty's coaching tree. I mean, they're more like acorns. They're not really in branches of the tree. They're more like acorns that dropped off and grew into coaches, right? Because they were young. It wasn't like they were, it wasn't like either of them were Coach Schottenheimer's like offensive coordinator who went on to get a job. They were kind of like more along that in the roots section of the tree, and that have grown into it. So another feather in Coach Marty Schottenheimer's hat for having those two, grow up around the organization and get into the NFL.
Very cool. Well, Joe, we've got to talk Underdog Fantasy, because Underdog Fantasy offers a unique approach to fantasy sports. With its simple pick'em style format, you can select players you believe will outperform expectations without the complexities of traditional DFS. The user-friendly interface and growing community make it easy and fun to play. And Joe, I mean, we've got a pretty cool offer for all the fans here who are into Underdog, into daily fantasy. Go use promo code BLEAVCHIEFS. That's BLEAVCHIEFS. That's BLEAVCHIEFS. You do that, the promo code gives new users a free pick and up to 1,000 bonus cash. So, Joe, we've got we have some cash that we're going to be playing on Underdog on the site. Report back, but back to Coach Schottenheimer, both Marty and Brian. Joe, I was an intern with the Bills, and this is when Greg Williams, who actually grew up in Excelsior Springs, was there, and he saw his son Blake, who would end up playing at Princeton. Blake Williams would like mix into the training camp rotation. He like return kicks. He'd catch passes occasionally. And I'm reading a book about Kyle Shanahan, another son of a coach, just like Brian Schottenheimer. And he was a receiver at Duke in Texas in college. And he would occasionally get in training camp reps. Did Brian Schottenheimer ever do that, or Marty was probably too by the book to do that?
Yeah. I mean, he loved having the family around. It was a family affair, as you know, the Chiefs, and it has always been and always will be as long as the Hunt family is there. But yeah, Coach Schottenheimer was. When we always said Marty time was Lombardi time. So like we kind of lived in a football world. There was, not that we didn't have fun and coach didn't give us our times to have fun, but yeah, there was definitely not going to be, anything diverting our attention away from what needed to happen. Coach Schottenheimer did sometimes allow Bill Cowher to sprint down on special teams because he liked to get in the mix and like cover kicks. And that was always an interesting sight to see Coach Cowher, and scout team covering kicks with no uniform on. But that was about, I think, as wild as it got on our walkthrough days. He'd let Coach Cowher do that. But other than that, yeah, he wasn't wasting any time, buddy, at practice.
That's kind of what I figured. And next time the Chiefs play the Steelers, we're going to have to get into those Bill Cowher stories. We're going to take a quick break here, and then we're going to shift gears and talk about free agency. Joe, I mean, it's already the offseason is here. The combine is not far away. I mean, teams can the franchise tag is a thing. Joe, so the Chiefs have 20 unrestricted free agents, and these are just unrestricted. They have a couple others who are restricted and stuff, but we're just going to talk about the unrestricted. I'm going to list them all. We're obviously not going to talk about everyone, but maybe there's a couple that you want to mention that, we need to sign this guy, or there's no way we sign this guy, or you're really interested by this particular guy. And obviously this is going to be a topic we revisit again and again. But so here are the 20: DeAndre Hopkins, Justin Reid, Charles Omenihu, Marquise Hollywood Brown, Carson Wentz, Josh Uche, Tershawn Wharton, Derek Nottie, DJ Humphries, Justin Watson, Samaje Perine, Nick Bolton, James Winchester, who's the long snapper, Mike Pennell, Kareem Hunt, Juju Smith-Schuster, Mecole Hardman, Marlon Tuiapoloto, who's a defensive tackle, Jody Fortson, and Trey Smith. Joe, take it from there.
Whew, that is a long list, buddy. I don't even know where to start. I'm wondering, like, if all goes awry, like, will the Chiefs even have a team left if they can't, I mean, because what you don't want to happen is you don't want like all the big names to go, and then we're left with, having to sign the names that we'd be okay with going, if you know what I mean. So I think you're right, Jeff. We need to focus first on the players that we absolutely feel like we need to keep. And then there's the ones we could probably then go to the ones where I think it's okay to let go. So I think that's the way we should frame this with our listeners, right? Is like, let's talk about the people we absolutely think we feel like they have to have. Then let's think about the people that are like, all right, well, if they lose that player, there's going to be somebody that is going to be able to fill in that if that person demands some money that the Chiefs don't want to waste. And not that you're ever wasting salary on a player, but that you're spending unneeded dollars, right? And I think when you look at the unrestricted, free agents, I mean, for me, obviously, Jeff, I'm going to be a little bit biased. I'm going to say Trey Smith has to be in that mix of players that they really have to keep. Considering all that's going on with the offensive line, if the Chiefs don't build an offensive line and make a dramatic splash in free agency, I think fans are going to have at it with Brett Veach. I mean,
it's interesting you say that, Joe. I think you look at that list, and Trey Smith might be the best player on that list. He's actually one of the guys I look at the list, and I think he might be one of the least likely to return. Just, Joe, they're spending so much. Juwan Taylor is on, I think, an $80 million contract. Tooney's on an $80 million contract. Creed Humphrey's the highest paid center. They need a left tackle. I just don't think they can devote that. I mean, you're talking almost. Yeah, I don't think they can devote those kind of resources just to one unit is important as much as we love offensive line on this podcast.
Yeah, no, I agree, buddy. It's gonna be interesting to see how it all plays out, and whether or not they can structure a deal to keep him. But you're right, he's probably the guy we need the most, but the one that might be the one that has the most opportunity to leave, because he's going to demand some major bucks. I mean, somebody is going, and you know what? He's won a Super Bowl. So he has that going for him. So he's not going to be tied to, hey, we made it, like, let's say this was his rookie year and he had the same, and he was the same guy. Like, he might say, oh man, or if maybe he was a 1-year free agent, like, oh, I'd really love to come back with the Chiefs to win a Super Bowl. Like, he's done it. He's won a Super Bowl. Now it's
Yeah,
time for him to
right.
go out and just cash in,
Yeah,
and he is going to
totally
get
agree.
paid. So you're right, Jeff. He's the guy that scares me the most of him leaving, but also the one that's probably going to be the one that absolutely is not there. I mean, I think next on the list, I mean, this is just my opinion. I just, the way that he played this year is, I think Nick Bolton is a guy that,
Yes.
I think we can build around, that the Chiefs can really build their defense around. I think he's athletic.
And
He's
Coach
only getting,
Spags loves him. Just loves him.
and look what they did. Look what that defense did in the Super Bowl with Saquon Barkley, and being able to sort of bottle him up. And we said that was going to be the key to the Chiefs defense, was that, and it was, Jeff. The Chiefs defense did not play that bad in that Super Bowl. Like, there wasn't a dramatic, like we talked about this already in our last pod. It wasn't like they held Barkley to 57 yards on 25 carries. They held Jalen Hurts to 221 yards. A lot of what happened was field position, right? I mean, the
Right.
average starting field position for the Eagles was their own 45, and that's dramatic. So I think Nick Bolton did his job and what he needed to do in that Super Bowl, and as far as captaining that defense. So I think he's probably the next guy that I would imagine, we kind of like have to keep. After that, I don't, like, if any of the guys went by themselves, I wouldn't go, oh, there goes the Chiefs season. Like, you know what I
Right.
mean? Like,
Right.
go through the names. Like, a couple of the defensive linemen, if we lose, I know Mike Pennell had that really good run at the end of last year,
Mhm.
but he didn't really have it at the end of this year, that what we saw from him.
And he's going to be 34 too.
Yeah,
So he's
yeah.
getting
And
up
Derek
there.
Nottie is probably a guy that we certainly would love to come back. But I don't know what else is out there. And you look at what the Eagles were able to do in the draft, and draft players at that defensive tackle position, and, get, a young Jalen Carter or something like that. I don't know if that player is still out there at the end of the draft at, pick number 31, but the defensive line scares me a little bit. I'm not 100% after that offsides penalty. I'm not 100% sure people are going to really want Omenu back. I think that's still sticking with people. But other than that, Jeff, there's no one I really like, literally going through the list. Then there's the players that I don't think they will bring back. Like, I'm not 100% sure. As much, I was a long snapper, so who am I to talk? Like, I'm not 100% sure they need to pay a free agent like James Winchester
Right.
if they can go out and get, somebody who can snap. I mean, it's
Right.
a skill that, there's a lot of really good snappers out there coming out of college, and somebody they can probably get to do that. As much as it pains me to say this, I don't know if Justin Watson will be here next year. I think just watching what happened, his lack of playing time, I know he had that 2-point conversion in the Super Bowl, but just, I'm not 100% sure if with his, with some of the demand that might come for him being a super solid backup, that he may not be back.
Joe, that's one of my takeaways from Justin Watson is in this group, that, like, what if there's one group of these 20 free agents, look at the receivers. They have DeAndre
Yeah.
Hopkins, Marquise Brown. We just mentioned our friend Justin Watson, Juju, McCole Hardman, all wide receiver. Like, where is this? Obviously, you can't sign all those guys. Who is going to come back? I think that's, for me, that's what stands out. And then two other things, Joe, I think that stand out for me are Justin Reid. is
Oh, yeah.
interesting. You know, he's like he's a good player, but I actually think the Chiefs have some good depth at safety. They have some young guys. They like Shamari Connors did well in just his second year. I thought Jaden Hicks really was good as a rookie. So that's interesting. I could see Justin Reid not being back just because he might be expensive and they have some good young talent. And the other
Yeah.
guy you mentioned was Charles Omenihu. We, like you said, bad taste in our mouth from that offside in the Super Bowl, but I think he's really interesting. No idea if he's going to be back. Move on, but we never really got to see Charles Omenihu. He had the suspension his first year with the team. He had a great AFC Championship game, made some like a huge deflection, but then he obviously tore up his knee and he missed most of this year. So it's like, yeah, it's like I'm really curious if like he stays or goes and could blossom into something because he just showed flashes and didn't really get a chance, or Joe, like, or maybe he's not something. Maybe he's a guy who makes plays like you mentioned, that critical penalty in the Super Bowl we just saw.
Yeah, I mean, he's a little, like you said, he's a little bit of a mystery. I mean, obviously, you got to look at the injury factors too. I mean, I thought Hollywood Brown, for me, I was really thinking of that it was going to be really, really good things. And you just, when somebody gets damaged like that, it must be really hard for a general manager and the staff and the personnel folks to really wonder, like, is it worth,
Right.
paying a guy that may not last the season, right? When you can probably just do that with Rashee Rice again, right? I mean, I know he's gonna have a whole year now to get better and rehab, and you've got I think Xavier Worthy definitely has proved himself as somebody that they can develop into definitely, if not the number one or number two receiver with those two guys. It definitely adds, it adds a lot to the mix to whether or not they can keep all these players or not, or if they want to keep all these players. I mean, Hollywood Brown, I thought, was going to be the ultimate third receiver. Like those three together really had me excited. Like I was super excited about where it was going. But Jeff, my thoughts all come back to, you can have all the great receivers you want, man. If you can't protect Patrick, like if the Chiefs don't do something up front, like, because I think, Jeff, the thing is, they didn't even have faith in the running game.
Right.
Like I can't believe, I know we talked about this already, but I've been thinking about it a lot more this week, thinking about it even more about Andy's inability or unwillingness to run the ball and to take some of the pressure off of Patrick and bring 6 or 7 up into the box and create some space out there for the receivers. Like, I don't know why that happened, and if it was a lack of confidence in this makeshift offensive line, and whether Mike Caliendo was going to be able to handle some of those big defensive tackles that the Eagles had, or like whether it was Joe Thuney not being great on the outside but much better on the inside. Like it just threw everything into a tizzy, and I really feel like whatever they do this offseason has to focus on the offensive line. They have to do something to make that a group of 5 that starts the season together and ends the season together, and that they're all on the same page. Because this was, to me, I've attributed, like, even more and more that I've thought about, I attribute like 60% of what happened in that loss to what happened up front on the Chiefs offensive line, because it just you saw what it did to Patrick and what it did to the entire game plan. So
100%, Joe, 100%.
so yeah, so there, but then there's some guys, that like we were saying, is DJ Humphrey even? No, he's not. That's not going to happen. He's off the list. I don't know if Samaje Perine is a guy they need to, unless they can get him for a steal.
Right.
Josh Uche. I mean, I don't know. Tershawn Wharton's probably another guy we should probably be on the fence about. I think he can play. I think if they could get him for solid backup or rotation money and maybe upgrade a little bit on the interior to support Chris Jones, that might be helpful. But it's going to they're going to have to strike a good deal with him to keep him, I think.
Yeah, great points all the way around, Joe. And like you said, we're going to be talking a lot about the offensive line this offseason. That's obviously the primary need, especially shoring up that left tackle position. I think after that, I'm curious to see what they do at cornerback, because that was a little area of weakness, and they have both Josh Williams, Jalen Watson, and also Trent McDuffie, who I think they're going to do everything to sign. They're going to be going into their free agent year next year. They're not free agents year, but they have. So what do they do about the cornerback position, and maybe the draft or free agency? And I think also running back.
Yeah.
What do they? We mentioned how Kareem Hunt is a free agent. Pacheco was banged up this year. Didn't quite have the year that he did that we're used to from him. But maybe injuries are catching up to him. Maybe it was just the injuries that happened this year. But what do they do about that? But of course, Joe, all eyes are going to be on the offensive line, and we're going to be talking about that all off season here for sure.
Definitely, Jeff. I totally agree. I mean, that's right where we need to focus. I think that's where fans are going to focus. And again, here we are. We're down at the bottom of the draft order, so they're going to have to work some magic with find another George Karlaftis down there, at pick 31.
And hey, if anyone can do it, Brett Veach certainly can. Well, if you enjoy this show presented by BetOnline, please subscribe. We're available on your favorite directories: iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Luminary, and TuneIn. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week.